great day.
Hey! Got to pay back. Revenge.
Thank you for tuning in for this special Mother's Day edition of the Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali. I am attorney Zulu Ali with the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, and Dr. Akil Bashir. This week, like we do every Sunday, we will be discussing important and critical legal issues affecting our communities. And before we begin again, I want to extend a happy Mother's Day to all of our listeners, all of our mothers out there, as well as my mother, who actually happens to be in the studio today, as well as my wife. Happy Mother's Day, Mom. And it being a special Mother's Day edition, we have a very, very special guest today, and it's activist and author Yusef Wali. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Wali.
Thank you, Ted.
Yusef Andre Wali was raised in South Central Los Angeles, California. By the age of 13, he started associating with gang members, and after serving a juvenile sentence, Mr. Wali continued his gang involvement with other known gang members, earning a reputation as a gangbanger in the areas of South Los Angeles, including Compton, Watts, and Willowbrook, which eventually landed him in the correctional system in California at the age of 21. After being placed in solitary confinement, Mr. Wali began to discover his spirituality and later converted to Islam. It was this spiritual faith that took him away from the destructive lifestyle of the gangs to a more purposeful and honorable way of living. He served 22 years before he was released in May of 2012, and at the age of 43, Mr. Wali has now been working for many years to end gang and youth violence through his development and writing intervention and rehabilitation programs. He is the creator and founder of the Timeless Group, a rehabilitation program which also provides housing for parolees in Los Angeles, California, and continues to provide training at several California correctional facilities. He also has assisted several reentry startup organizations in the San Francisco Bay Area, a former commissioner on the Human Rights Relations Commission of the City of Union City, Alameda County reentry panels and advisory boards. He is an author and has gained an associate's degree in small business management, as well as a paralegal degree, and is a certified trainer and coach of the John Maxwell team. Mr. Wali is currently the executive director of the Timeless Group Incorporated, lead consultant at Prison Counseling USA, and a reentry coach. It's a pleasure again to have you with us today, Mr. Wali, and discussing something that I believe is really appropriate at this juncture, especially on a day like Mother's Day, where we talk about correcting the correction system. And obviously, I know that you advised that from the very beginning. I think that you entered the system at a juvenile and ultimately ended up at the adult correctional system. So I think that you actually have a lot of insight both in the juvenile aspect of it as well as the adult aspect of it. And also the fact that you have been very, very much involved with individuals who are coming out of the program and who are looking and providing them that foundation and resources that we were talking about earlier, so that they can actually get a good start once they have been released from the correctional system. I'm going to begin by, I think that one of the things that is an issue with the correction system is trying to figure out what is our objective with our correction system. I mean, some of those may seem to approach the correctional system from a way of a punishment or a punitive type aspect, or whether it's for rehabilitation, or whether it's actually for the purpose of deterring people from committing other crimes or committing crimes. And maybe, some see it as a combination of all three. Mm-hmm. But I mean, what is your perspective on the correctional system?
Yeah, in the last 10 years or so, we've seen the California correctional system change some. And I think a lot of it is largely due to the change in administration that we had with Jerry Brown being in office, a lot of the actually positive shifts. When they changed the name of Department of Corrections to Rehabilitation, they tagged that on to the end of the title of California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. When they first did that, it wasn't, definitely rehabilitation wasn't something that was a part of the package, right? It was actually incarceration. So for a long time, prior to this change in the correctional system, you saw a lot of folks just being pretty much warehoused. And that's how I saw it. It was just pretty much lock up as many folks as you can, build these new prisons, state-of-the-art prisons in areas that stimulates the economy and give folks jobs that never worked in the correction department before. We've seen a lot of craziness happen as a result of that. And in fact, during that period of time, we talking about between Pete Wilson being the governor, Gray Davis, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, we saw 14 prisons being built. And, there's certain states in the United States that don't have that many prisons total, right? But just in a short period of a few governors, we witnessed a boom in the prison industrial complex and the construction of all of these new prisons. And largely, it wasn't to rehabilitate. It was actually to incarcerate. In fact, one of the things that I think about is how, when you look at California particularly, the way they divide up the prison system with the races and the gangs and things like that, they actually perpetuated the violence and the confusion that exists inside the system, so that when you get out, you're going to be worse than you were when you went inside. So all of that would help to keep that growth of the prison industrial complex by constantly creating new criminals, I would say. Because, you got individuals, that I know very well that when they came in the system, they wasn't really hardened criminals. They might have gotten caught up because of their circumstance or their situation they happened to be in, got sentenced for the first time. It was a lot of people coming to prison for the very first time. But once they got there is when they became criminals, and that's the way California had it set up. And like I said, divided up between the gangs, between the North, the South, the Crips, the Bloods, you name it. They actually identified these different blocks of conflict. And they actually, they acknowledged it, they supported it, and it helped, create that boom in the construction of the prison system in California. So that's where we seen things going during my incarceration, so.
Yeah, it seems like, and I think we were also talking about it earlier, that it for whatever reason, it seems that our lawmakers somehow feel that the way that you deal with the problems, especially when it relates to the criminal activity, whether it's adult or juvenile, is just to basically lock people up.
Right.
And if that's obviously what you see is that although we happen to be one of the states that probably locks people up more than probably anybody else, both in numbers and in years, we're not the safest state.
No.
So obviously, locking people up definitely does not make you safer. You know? And I think that you made a really important point when you said that sometimes, basically what you're doing is kind of like a criminal manufacturing, facility where you're actually making criminals, and basically what people are doing when they get out, because they don't have, you're sending someone who may clearly don't have any skills and don't have resources to begin with, and now you've put somebody back on the street that now doesn't have the resources and has a criminal record, and obviously he's limited to what he can do when he gets out, because you haven't really done anything to help rehabilitate him and make him a more beneficial member of society. And so as far as inside the system itself, is there any effort at all to try to implement any kind of programs or anything to help rehabilitate, or maybe give them the resources to make them a more productive member of society?
Well, no, actually, like I went in during the '80s, the early '90s period, and at the time, the only thing that they actually had that was for rehabilitation was programs like Alcohol Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, which was mandated mostly by judges and courts, and so folks had to do those programs. So, of course, the correctional department made those programs available. But in terms of domestic violence, help that people need, and you're talking about California, where you have a large percentage of the individuals that's being incarcerated got gang backgrounds, gang affiliation. Right. So there was no programs that addressed those issues, so, it was organizations or, myself and others that decided to take action while we were inside to bring that, and we fought for that. We literally had to fight to bring rehabilitation to the prison system. It wasn't something that they were supporting. In fact, they looked at it as though, y'all trying to be slick, y'all trying to outsmart us, or they looked at it very negative when they saw that we were trying to move away from the criminal thinking and mentality. It was always some kind of angle we were trying to put forth, right, versus really trying to change ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just listening to you about the different types of programs that they offer in prison is always Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, and I'm always looking at this and saying, look, here it is, a person comes to jail for domestic violence, for rape, for robbery, for some type of gang activity. You don't have Gang Anonymous. You don't have Rape Anonymous. I mean, you're warehousing these individuals, and you're not dealing with the problem that got them there in the first place. Right. And so they're prone to repeat this, this same behaviorism once they, return to the street. Right. And then, like you say, they segregate you so much inside of prison because, you have all these different areas, and, the 415 can't walk in the Mexican area. The Mexicans can't walk over here in the Crip area. The Crip can't walk. You got to get permission, just to walk through or walk past because somebody, going to feel offended or disrespected if you walk past their territory. I mean, they create this in you. And when you get out, you ain't never went to jail. You ain't never had a racist bone in your body. But then when you leave prison, I don't like Mexicans. I don't like blacks. I don't like this, so forth and so on. So they create these individuals, and then they toss them back out to the world and expect them to respond, expect them to be able to swim. How can you?
I think a real important part that hasn't really been addressed, and I've recently talked about it more, about I coined this idea of this Hollywood syndrome, because especially in California where you have gangs as a big issue, a lot of the guys, people like ourselves, when we were in that lifestyle of gangbanging, we wanted to be just like the people in TV. Right. We wanted an image just like Hollywood. So I call it the Hollywood syndrome, right? Because look at the names we take on. We take on the same names that we see on TV, on Hollywood. Bugsy and people that they made big movies about, Gotti, and we took on these names. Look at the names, Babyface. These are the names that we name ourselves when we in the streets, because we want to be just like them. We want to be recognized, right? But the minute we able to be recognized in a positive way, the shift, that you see in people's thinking, and like myself. I mean, I was a thug. I was on the street. I wore a red bandana hanging out my pocket. I was a thug. I was on the street, like that. So when I realized just getting my GED and learning a trade made my mind shift. Something like, wait a minute, I can do something, right? But a gang member is thinking the same way. Oh, I'm good at this. I'm good at being a thug. They know who I am. I'm in Hollywood. See the lights. We know how we try to get a reputation. So it's the same thing. So how do you break that? So we attack that head on when we were inside. So.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you think that, man, is this, it seems like it's kind of like constructed or created to be that way, because, I mean, you also have to realize that the whole idea of separating people, in an institution, and sometimes you think, well, the way that you're able to do it is you creating this conflict among people, because that's, it's kind of like prison is almost like a microcosm of society.
It is.
So you can you look and you see, how can so few people control so many people, and the way you control people is you create this artificial differences between them, and you can you can control them, which is the way things happen really in the world.
Absolutely.
So that's the way powerful people can control people. In the house. So, you go in, you see, how can 100 correctional officers control 1,000 people? And that's how they do that.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes I think it's kind of like something that they manufacture. And are they really concerned about, making people a positive and constructive member of society?
Right.
I mean,
yeah. I just go ahead.
So, and the thing about it is no mandate for individuals like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. You have to do these programs in order to do that. And for the individuals that don't go to the board or nothing like that, they're not mandated to go to school to better educate themselves. They're not mandated upon them. I've always said that you have three types of people in jail. You have the living, the dying, and the merely existing. And the living is a small population of ones who want to educate themselves and use it as their university. It's a small population. And then the ones that are dying, as we see them, they pump them up on all these hot medications. You see cats walking around like zombies and stuff like that because they feed them this, and it's easy for them to get this psychotropic medication. And then you have those who are merely existing. They take the place as a vacation or resort. They sitting there playing the pinochle day in and day out. You can find this one person sitting there every single day at the same exact time. He's going to be in that exact same spot every time because he's lounging. He's just waiting for his date to come. Right. So he's not getting into no trouble. He's just existing. And those are the type of people that are in prison. They're not pushing education. They're not pushing rehabilitation. And like you say, there was a shift when Jerry Brown came on. But how many people are really going to push it once he mandate that so forth and so on needs to be applied?
Well, the push came from the outside. Like he said, they started pumping a lot of folks with medication because, it created a huge, breakdown in people just who they were. When they came in, they were these tough guys or whoever they were, and they got so much time. They broke them off 20, 30 years, 2 life sentences, who wouldn't be taking medication, right? And but it also created that change where we see the realignment, Prop 47 in California because of the mental health crisis that was taking place. So that's what actually caused them to begin to look at rehabilitation again, something that wasn't looked at when they added the word, a suffix to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. So, but Timeless, we came along, and I think we're probably one of the few or first groups that actually did what we did. We did something that no one else had done at that time. Right. So,
yeah, it's one of the things I wanted to talk about was, like in comparison, we know that it's no secret that as far as a developed country where we have one of the largest prison populations in the world, by far.
Right.
And so I know that Doc had actually been to some of the prisons like in El Salvador. And so, I'm just kind of curious as to how the prison system in comparison to the United States, what is is there similarities? What did you see?
Well, I think, let me give you a little bit of history. I think we got to first understand that this country is a suppression-driven country. The prison system is part of the suppression that is utilized to basically correct correct behaviors. The prison industrial complex was started in the early 70s to control the social movement of the militancy that was going on across the country. So the whole purpose under COINTEL was to take the individuals who was pushing the aggression against the federal government and to lock them up. That is what started the gangs of the 80s, because most of the gangs before that were politically oriented gangs. The Slauson, the businessmen, the gladiators, they became part of the revolutionary movement, and the way to get them out of the revolutionary movement was to lock them up, take them out, etc. Then what happened was you created the prison industrial complex on a corporate perspective. See, one of the things we forget is that those inmates that are housed, most of these prisons that are coming up are private prisons. And they're using the inmates now for the fodder of turning out an economic dollar. The concept of rehabilitation, which was initially what the prison system was supposed to do, had never rehabilitated. You know, we actually, talking about a correction system, it was never for correcting. It was to house, and it was to basically to control a given mindset. And even when they get out, what are they developed? What are they looking for? You look at the average corporation in America, it has line workers. The prisoner is being trained to be a line worker and nothing else. So this is the way they control that dynamic. Now, as you look across the globe, with the exception of places like El Salvador, et cetera, you will actually see that component of rehabilitation. You go to Sweden, you see the same dynamic. When you look across the globe that I've been fortunate to do, Germany, it's a whole different nexus. Now, remember, in El Salvador and Honduras, the fact that they had heavy hands, Montesutra, they created a whole different suppression component to specifically control the prisoners. It's almost a kill-on-sight mindset. So they have picked up a lot of the concepts in America, and actually they're a lot worse. In the prison industrial complex in El Salvador, you've got basically 7 jails. They divide MS 13 and 18th Street, which are the dominant factors out there. Then they have a juvenile prison, and then they have an all-females prison. The female prisoners are allowed to have their children with them up to the age of 5. But the prison is so canceristically deteriorated. I mean, they have dirt floors, they have rats running around there. They have no kind of concept of any kind of crafts and arts, etc. We were up there in 2013 specifically to validate the gang truce that was going on. We had free access to all the prison. The guards wouldn't even go into prison with us. They stayed outside the gate because it was so bad. A prison that has 500 individuals are made for 500. They had 5,000 in there. This was the dynamic, but they picked so much of that up from America and the fact that so much funding was coming from America. The prisons across the globe, for the most part, are 1,000% better than American prisons. Those countries that have that dictatorship, you'll see an alignment there.
Wow. And so, as far as, and also, I'm just kind of curious as far as the Timeless group, and the fact that your organization basically is involved in basically, you know, I guess giving these individuals a foundation. I mean, how did you get that started? I mean, what inspired that?
Well, what inspired it is actually during the time that I was incarcerated, and it was actually during the time that I believe Gray Davis was the governor, and he was on his way out, and Arnold was coming in. And at the time, you know, I was a lifer. I was sentenced to 16 years to life. And many of us were lifers on the facility where I was housed on. And so we were pretty much looking at legal stuff to figure out how do we get out. You know, we was looking for loopholes. How do we get out of prison through the law, through the legal system, right? So you have the jailhouse lawyers, and I even got a paralegal degree during the time I was there, right? And we were trying to figure it out that way. But then as I was going through their, you know, their policies and procedures and rules and regulations of the California Department of Correction system, where it talked about lifer prisoners, it says that you could be released. And I kept focusing on that. You can be released, but it was all based on your change, your rehabilitation. So I began to shift from the legal to rehabilitation. I said, you know, I think we should focus here on rehabilitation. And I started workshops. I began a workshop. The first one that I started was called SAFE. It was an acronym. I don't know, it just came to my mind, SAFE. I would lay down on my bed at night and get up and come up with an idea. And it was an acronym that means staying out of prison, addressing addiction, family in crisis, and earning a legitimate living. So I did a workshop based on that, and it was 4 weeks because it was a 4-letter acronym, and it went really good. You know, people came out to it. I got access to the chapel at the prison, and from there, some of the guys approached me and like, man, you good at this? Maybe you could take it to the administration. And that's what I did. You know, I took it to the administration, and they gave me access to the facility, the chapels, the child hall, etc. And the guards, the prison guards, actually didn't like it. They like, what are they doing? They thinking they slick. They trying to get over, or you know, it was always we were trying to do something underhanded, right? but it actually grew into something that it became like 12 components. It started at SAFE, and then we ended up building other ones. One is called 9 Steps to Street Gang Recovery. These are the different curriculum courses that I authored myself. And, gang rehabilitation, domestic violence prevention, STOP, which is an acronym for Straight Talk on Point. And the warden began to take notice, and they sent somebody at us, and they tried to steal the program, actually. And they tried to go up to Sacramento on their own and get it, legitimized. And my father found out about it. I told my father, and he reached out to Sacramento and said, hey, this is something that my son authored, and this and that and the other. And they apologized, handed over everything back to me. And from there, I signed my father off as the power, had my power of attorney because I was still inside. And eventually, I would be released. I began helping brothers, individuals, everybody. That was another thing with me. I didn't just work with the black population or, or the Muslim population. It wasn't a particular population. It was the Asians. Actually, a lot of people attribute me to breaking them out of their shell because they was like, over here in the corner, like he was saying, everybody got their block. And I kind of opened that door for the Asian population to start coming in, and I helped them with their rehabilitation. I said, look, you got to reform your thinking, and the program was designed that way. So you couldn't come in faking, like you was just wanted a certificate, right? You couldn't get in if you just, I just want a certificate and I want to. No, you literally had to go through the program. So the warden and everybody started paying attention to that, and they actually made it what they called a L tag back then. It's leisure activity inmate group, right? And Sacramento actually approved it. So it was approved as a legal program even before I was released. So once I was released, that's when I pursued the 501c3 and established the organization as a 501c3 organization where we actually offer housing and everything. But that's a main component. The Department of Corrections are now actually, they just started. I just got my first check from CDC and R for my program. At Tracy prison, and it's called Dual Vocational Institution, which is in Tracy, California. So they're actually reaching out to me for the program to implement the program at other institutions in the state of California. So, yeah.
I want to know how you come up with the name Timeless.
So actually, the original name was Timeless with the ESS at the end, but we couldn't use that, so we went with our alternate name because it was already being used, the legal part of it. So the name Timeless was our alternate name because it was 2 parts because we doing time. right? And the second part of it is lists, because you had to sign up on a list to get out the housing unit to come to our program. And that's how it became time lists. Because the way we used to get guys to come to the program, we used to say, man, you ain't doing nothing but time. You know what I'm saying? Go on and sign up on this list. You know?
That's right.
And they started filling up the child halls, you know. We had a wait list even longer than AA and NA. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's right.
One of the things that, you know, seems to be troubling, I think troubling to most people who really care, is the disparity in the sentencing. And we've seen a lot of disparity in the sentencing based upon racial and ethnic groups.
Right.
And obviously, you know, I think it's no secret that African Americans and Hispanics actually receive more time for similar or the same crimes that maybe, you know, non-minorities or white people are receiving. And so, I mean, is that kind of is that something that became apparent to you during the time period in which you were incarcerated?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, you know, one of the books that I read when I was in solitary confinement, because my change actually took place when I was in solitary confinement, and I was put in solitary confinement for assaulting a prison guard. You know, there was a lot of racial tension, and that's when, you know, I actually started realizing what was happening during that time. It was a big shock to me. It was like when my mind opened up and it was no longer the black on black crime and the gang banging and all of that stuff. I immediately realized that, wait a minute, you know, and that's actually the reason I named the book If I Knew Then, because, you know, if I knew then what I know now, right?
Exactly.
And that's actually part two, if I know what I know now, right? But that's the reason that I named the book that, because it was like, man, you know, look what's happening to us. Because during the time I was in solitary confinement, I only had like 3 or 4 books in there and nothing else, you know, 4 walls, right, in a 12 by 12 cell. And is it smaller than that? Yeah, 12 by 12, I believe, something like that.
You can touch both walls with your hand. That's for sure.
So
Yes, sir.
I realized that, you know, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I read the World Almanac. And in the World Almanac, it had a lot of statistics and stuff like that. And that's when I started, like, my mind just started opening up. And you know, and I seen even Islam. When I seen the section on Islam in there, I was like, man, all this stuff I didn't know about, right? You know, and it just opened my mind up. And it just felt like we just been tricked. I've been you know, hoodwinked, like bamboozled, like what Malcolm X said, right? And that's how I felt. I literally felt like that.
Yes.
So that's when I opened up and realized that there was a definitely disparity in the amount of African Americans that were being incarcerated, and a lot of it was I associate it largely to education.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The lack of education, because so many of us changed our lives just on education. When we realized that we had a mind and we could think, and that we can read, we can comprehend and get degrees, and it was like everybody was looking at each other like, you know what? Why are we doing that? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's deep. It's really deep, actually.
Yeah, I always say there's a big difference between training and an education.
That's right.
And that's kind of what they
Yes.
do. You know, is they basically, you know, when you begin to start reading and thinking for yourself,
Right.
then it's amazing how your mind opens up and you begin to start doing things in a more productive way. And oftentimes, you know, I had the conversation where, you know, talking with people and telling them that basically, you know, they don't hate you. You know, they fear you, and they fear who you can become.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
I always said, you know, you don't go after the champion. You know, you go after you don't go after the challenger. You go after the champion. So why would you, you know, spend so many? You know, it's like if you were, you know, in the whether you're a boxer or an athlete, you know, who is the person that you want to knock off? I mean, you don't spend that much time thinking about somebody that's not going to really be of any threat to you. So the only reason why that they spend so much time is because they understand that if you become if you know who you really are, this is really what's going to happen to you. You know, like I said, like, you know, think about, you know, Dr. Martin Luther King. You know, he was the most nonviolent person that there was. You know what I mean? Why are you killing a man that preached nonviolence?
Exactly.
And the reason why is because he was educating people and he was making people understand
Right.
you know, who they really are. And when you become who you become dangerous in a different way, but then you become productive, like yourself. I mean, and you know, brothers, I mean, like the things that you've done is brilliant. You know what I mean? I mean, you're very clearly a brilliant person, and to think that you have this brilliant individual who's able to do these things that has caught the attention of, you know, public officials from where you know, when you went into the system.
Right.
You know, it's because you didn't know who you were.
Right.
Yeah.
You see what I'm
Absolutely.
saying? And they didn't want you to know that.
Right.
You know, and just imagine if we all were able to educate ourselves and not necessarily be trained. You know, I remember when I was in college and I wrote this paper, and the professor said, you didn't cite to anything. And I said, well, I didn't cite to anything because it's from my head. You know what I mean?
Right,
He says you got to cite to something. So, you know,
Right.
you write, these people, they write dissertations, they write papers, and they're citing to something. You know, they got all these books out there. Because basically what you're doing is they're teaching you to grab onto some sort of socioeconomic political paradigm.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Because, you know, you're not thinking for yourself.
Exactly.
You know what I
Right.
mean? You're always referring to something else. And when you begin to start thinking for yourself, then you become a very, very, you know, dangerous individual.
Well,
And-
I'm sorry. I mean, when you said that, I thought about for like maybe 4 or 5 years, when they seen how I was able to bring people together, they moved me from prison to prison.
Wow.
I was getting moved so many times. You know, everybody that know me from back then in the 90s and early 2000s, every time they look up, I'm being moved. And finally, when I got to Avenal State Prison, the warden and one of the captains on the facility, who happened to be African American, said, "Leave me alone." He literally told them that, leave him alone. You know, because they seen Crips and Bloods coming together. They seen Latinos. They seen people that would normally be rioting on the yard coming in the same room doing programs. That bothered them. It literally bothered them.
Yeah.
You know, and they like, I was the troublemaker. So they did things to me to try to disrupt the program. They would move me, or they wouldn't open my cell door on time. You know, they would do things to me because they like, he's a problem, right? One year we did a track meet where I would do this regularly. Every time there was a holiday or something like that, I would bring guys together. We would do like a track meet. We would have a spread on the yard. And they would see all of these races. They would see all these rival gang members spending time with each other, laughing and talking. And I would get approval to get a music box on the yard where the music playing and people having fun. And that literally bothered them. They would the guards would just stand on the walls and look at us and be like, this guy Wiley.
But see, where I would salute you, Brother Youssef, and we got to be clear on something in talking about knowledge.
Right.
Knowledge is not power. It's enthusiasm that flips the switch. See, you can acquire knowledge in prison, but if you do nothing with that knowledge, all it is a vessel of information that sits there. And one of the things that the prison industrial complex does, it eradicates you from really taking action. You got to move with a degree of extreme progression. It's like this, you know. At the end of the day, when you look at a situation, and to be trained to move means you take specific skill sets, you develop protocol, you take action. And every time you take action in the prison industrial complex, they will clamp down on you. They'll give you more time. They'll put you in the hole, etc. They want you mentally defunct to where there's no ability for you to move. So you could have all the information in the world. It's not, you know, you don't get motivated and then take action. It's the other way around. You take the action and then the motivation comes. And you were motivated and you kept the process moving. That's why they moved you. That's why they constantly tried to suppress you, because they didn't want others to gravitate towards that action that you were taking. And see, in a prison industrial complex, the taking of action keeps that mind motivated, so you don't get hung up in that four walls, which are basically eliminating you from doing anything because you think you're trapped. You got to think outside. You can't see the walls. You got to see the vision. You got to see the long-term goal. And so many people can't do that.
You know, I remember coming through the youth authority back in like 1990 all the way till probably around 90, 94, 95. And one of the things that they pushed, because they allowed me to work in the library. That was one of my first jobs. And I was start reading all these different books, you know, and it amazed me how many people that I have encountered that says, I read Malcolm and it was done. It was over. He set me on his path. And I'm telling you, that's how I got started. It was the first book that I ever read from cover to cover. But then after that, I began to read about Fat Joe Turner and all of Dizzy Gillespie and all of these different people, right? And I'm like, wow, what is this? But what they were pushing in there was Donald Goins, Iceberg Slim, all of these different books that deal with this criminal mentality. And people was like, you read that Iceberg Slim book? You read this Donald Goins book? And it kept all these youngsters captivated on this criminal mentality. But then you only had that small population, small little section in the back area that dealt with the real positive educational books, you know. And it's just a trip how I think back now and I look at that and seeing how many Donald Goins books and Iceberg Slim books that I saw up on the shelf.
Well, I would just add to that, how do you know, when you stop and think about it, look, let's be honest, we're in the prison system all the time. We've been for years. When you have the Serranos and the Teos controlling the prison environment in California, how do you justify that? Anybody that's in that system right now knows the only black operative in there is the the Black Guerrilla family, and they were once one of the most progressive political organizations. They dabbled in and out of some stuff, but you've got basically California being controlled by two basic cartels, the prison system for the most part. How do you allow that? There's a system in place that specifically wants that perpetuation. There's a system that in place that wants that divided culture, so there is no ability to progress. You've got to be a revolutionary to step above all that, like Brother Yusef did and a few others have done, to move a process forward with the understanding that you're going to have to face the consequences that are going to come. That's what most people don't want to do. See, when you know those consequences are going, and it's clear in the prison system, if you break their mode of operation, look for the downfall. So very few people can step out of that and move a process forward. So anybody that can, like this brother over here who set some specific templates in place, we've got to use that to continue others and to get that mindset of others to move themselves forward. That's why I'm glad he wrote that book, so others that are in there could see what were some of the steps he took. But understand, you are going to be challenged in the process.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was challenged to the end. I'm telling you, I was. You know, and I actually went to the hole again.
Yep.
Towards the end of my release, closer to my actual release, and you wouldn't believe what they was trying to claim. They actually said that they put the goon, what they call the goon squad, right? They come through they come rushing through the doors and everything with the riot gear, snatch me up, me and a few other brothers. Actually, one of my co-founders, one of the guys that came to me and said I should do this and take it, put us in the hole. And when we finally found out what we were in there for, because they kept telling us that Homeland Security was involved. I said, Homeland Security? Come on now. And they said that we were plotting to take out the warden, one of a senator. I didn't even know the senator. I didn't even know who the senator was that they mentioned, right? And Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. That's what they. And it was on paper. It was literally on paper. And by the time I actually reached out to CARE, I don't know if y'all familiar with the organization CARE, pretty big organization based in the Bay Area. I know for here is in the Bay Area for California. They actually helped with some letters and things like that, and I had other support on the outside that they rushed me out of that hole when they seen people on the outside actually supporting me. They literally was racing us out of the hole to get out the hole, right? Because they knew that it was a bunch of junk, right? And when I went to the parole board on the day that I was found suitable for parole, they asked about it too, and when one of the other commissioners just looked at the other one now like that was garbage, and they didn't even pursue it. They didn't even bring it up again during that hearing. And then I was released. I was found suitable for parole and was released.
Yeah, but you 1 in a million. So
Yeah.
you 1 in a million.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how, the correctional. I mean, there's two issues obviously we have to end up tackling. Number one is trying to keep them out of the correction system.
Yes.
And then when they, trying to lower the recidivism rate.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I mean that's just so important.
Right.
And it's something that I don't think that they really pay attention to. I mean, because really it's just a system of punishment than it is more anything else. They're not looking for an opportunity to figure out how do you keep these individuals from finding themselves back into the same situation. And it's almost like, I mean, I'm always a believer in, it's all about, forgiveness and redemption. You know what I mean? I mean, that's really, in the final analysis, that's what really, like, if forgiveness and redemption is not the focal point of who we need to be as a society, then America deserves no love. You see what I mean? I mean, because if you look at the history of our country, and then thinking about how did you come into existence, right? If we don't forgive and think that this country is capable of redeeming itself based upon what happened to, the slave trade and what happened to the Native Americans and what's happened throughout history, and even recent history. When we think about what has happened to what they've done to the human rights violations, you know. And so I think it's hypocritical to begin to start thinking that we can't redeem people and that we shouldn't focus on forgiving people. And I'm a big believer in that. Right. And the question is, when you put somebody in this system, regardless of how they got there, you know, these are golden. These are like yourself, brother. I mean, you are a gem that could have been lost. You know what I mean? Right. You know, you were blessed, obviously, by the Creator to be given the opportunity. But at the same time, there's many people that, had they been given different, you know, situations. Just think about who they could have been. Right. You know what I mean? Right. You know, and because I've met some of the most brilliant people that I've ever met in my life, you know, who have actually served time. As a matter of fact, the most brilliant people that I've ever met in my life are individuals that have served time. You know what I mean? It's just like, you know, you just happen to have been in a situation where they got lost in the shuffle. Right. You know what I mean? And it's easy to do. It's just a matter of circumstance. But I'm also the type of person who judges a man by distance travel. I'm so, you know, inspired by someone like yourself and someone like Bilal, who's taken a situation like that. You know what I mean? You've been down for 20-something years, and look at where you are now. Right. You see what I mean? I mean, that, to me, that's just like, I mean, that is a true testament, you know, of a man. You know what I mean? Who's done that, and it's so inspirational, and to have people to see something like that, man, is just, you know, it's just amazing, man. It's just really inspirational to me, and you know, my hats off to you and your book. Where can somebody get your book? If I Knew Then? Yeah, If I Knew Then is available on Amazon.com. So it's we actually added a second edition. I noticed some typos in the first edition. This edition is fine. You can get through it, but there is a second edition now available on Amazon.com if you want it. I actually brought a couple of copies here as well. Don't forget, you're supposed to give me that autographed copy. Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to touch on something I see here about recidivism. And one of the things I want to say about my organization in particular, we actually have like 0.1% recidivism rate. Wow. So out of all the people that's passed through our program, the Timeless Group, only one has been back to prison. Only one. Wow. Out of hundreds, right? So, and we just found that out recently. This is just recently where we've had someone that's actually went back to prison. But about this whole idea of recidivism, and in California particularly, first of all, you have to be an exceptional person to not revert back to what you used to do, right? Because it's such a challenge of coming home and having a criminal background now, and having to run your record, you know, and see, you know, some of the guys that served a lot of time, nothing shows up, so they're able to get jobs. You know, if they've done more than 10 years, right, it doesn't come back. But if they have to do a live scan, then, you know, everything they've done it shows up. So it's challenging. I will say in LA County in particular, they're doing a lot of great things. I actually applaud the mayor, Eric Garcetti, because he's actually put a lot of stuff on the book. He signed off on a lot of good stuff, you know, that actually advocates for individuals that's formerly incarcerated to be employed, even in the city, and working in city jobs. So I really appreciate that. But that's what it's going to take, you know, in terms of you know, looking for careers, not just jobs, because the cost of living, that's another thing that could push a person back to that life, right? Is when they get out and they see the cost of living, and then how much they're going to earn on you know, a day-to-day job. So I'm looking at ways that I can connect them with unions. I'm actually working with a union, electrical union, that's helping individuals get in that field where they can make some good money, you know, and have a retirement package, the whole deal, right? So we try to work with employers and potential employers that could hire our guys that's coming out, that's in our housing programs, that's viable work. I'm always emphasizing that. You know, I don't want them just to have a job. You know, we can give them a job, you know, right? But we want them to have a career so that when they leave, they can take care of their families. They can get married. We encourage people to get married and things like that.
But how are you going to do that? How are you going to take care of wife? How are you going to take care of family if your criminal background is preventing you from getting a job paying more than minimum wage? In California, it's not going to happen. Right?
Absolutely.
You know, and then you don't qualify for most of the affordable housing programs because of your background. So there's a lot of obstacles there. So a person that's used to put money on the street, you know what I'm talking about, right? I mean, that's what he's going to revert back to. He's going to be like, hey, I can make more money doing this. Right?
Exactly.
But if we're offering these opportunities, and they are out there now, but, you know, I think more as a community, we have to do more to help individuals get in those type of positions.
Yeah.
You know, so.
You know, I can remember early, I used to have this saying that I'd rather go downtown and live on Skid Row and pimp out a cardboard box than go back to prison again, you know, because, you know, there was those obstacles, you know, and I was one of the blessed ones that didn't, you know, just worked my way through. And with individuals that's coming out, man, it's going to take a lot of determination because there are those obstacles, man. There's a lot of obstacles out there, you know, and I've always said that, look here, if you can't get something, create your own.
Yep.
That's right, man. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's, you know, it's definitely a very difficult task, and my hat's off to individuals who are able to put themselves through a situation like that and get themselves back on track. And again, I applaud you for, you know, you're doing more than the prison system is doing. You know what I mean? Keeping people out.
Well, they actually just now starting to show that now. I mean, they reaching out to me. I'm getting calls from different prisons all the way up to Susanville. Just recently reached out to me as well. And that's like Nevada. It's like being in Reno, Nevada, because it's right there near the Reno-Nevada border. So they are asking me to come up there. And now they actually have me involved in training their staff. So when they purchase my curriculum, I'm training their the staff sponsors that supervise in my program that's at that prison. So they actually paying me to do those things now. So finally, they've been getting it for free for what, 6 years? Well, actually longer than that, since 2009. So I mean,
yeah, it's about time they pay for it. That's right. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they paying everybody else.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah,
that's for sure. Yeah.
Well, like Mr. Wiley's, you know, working so hard on keeping people out of the street, out of the prisons system. There's also actually, most recently, a couple of teachers are striking throughout the nation, kind of coming out and talking about the issues that their students in minority communities face with regards to education and not being provided with the resources necessary for them to succeed. I feel like, I think we can all agree, like we had mentioned before, that education is really important and really key in not only, you know, keeping those people that are already in the prison, kind of motivate them to get out and helping them find a way out, but also students and youth nowadays to kind of stay away from prisons, because education is key in that. Yet it's so exasperating to know that, you know, we are the 40th in the world in math and science, yet we hold 25% of prisoners in the world. So that in itself is really exasperating. So it's really amazing that we have individuals like you, Mr. Wiley, that are, you know, out there kind of motivating people that are already in the prison industrial complex, and that you yourself are a testimony to those people who are in there. And that we also have these teachers, you know, that are protesting across the country and kind of motivating people to kind of speak out on this different aspect of the prison industrial complex system, which deals with education, making sure that, you know, students nowadays have the resources necessary for them to not even, you know, go into the prison industrial complex.
That prison, that, you know, like, I think that some of the leaders in the prisons, private prisons now, I think one is GO, one is CCA, Corrections Corporation of America. And, you know, I'm not really a fan of that. I mean, that's
one of the worst things in the world.
Yeah, and a lot of them, you know, they have lobbyist organizations, you know, so obviously you're profiting in many different ways for someone's pain. You know what I mean? And I mean, I think that's kind of, and again, you talked about the labor, the use of the labor, you know, really, I mean, what are you really what's going on? I mean, this is kind of, you know, America, you know, we have the ability to, you know, remove ruthless dictators in a matter of weeks. But we can't stop gang violence. We can't stop all these things and deal with, you know, like, you know, children in the schools, or make our schools safe. We can't make schools safe. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, you can't make a school safe, so then we're in a lot of trouble. And I think that it's not really necessarily it's our priorities.
No,
we don't
no,
really care
no.
about individuals.
I would go. We can stop it overnight. We forget people have made careers off of suppression. Let's don't get the mix. You look at every municipality, the biggest part of their yearly budget is suppression. Okay, let's I mean, people to stop this system and change this system, you're going to have a lot of people have to change directionally their job, what they're doing, their careers. And you were talking about a minute ago, we will do a disservice if we don't applaud the people in the street that in the last 5-6 years have challenged this system, this prison industrial complex. It's across the nation, especially California. They're trying to make Proposition 47 look like it is the cause of the upswing in violence. The people have stepped up and said, we are not going to tolerate this. And when you look at what is happening in terms of the marches across the nation, et cetera, you have a momentum now. But the thing we have to be careful of, a movement is not a moment. And far too often we'll get some impetus behind and we'll see change, but then we'll fall off. So we have got to keep the drive on. But politicians, they adhere to numbers. They adhere to constituents. And when you come out in numbers, they know their survival is possibly in question because their constituents is so upset. That's what's happening across the nation. So brothers like Brother Youssef, et cetera, those of us that are in that penal system, we got a support mechanism now that's behind us. We're not out there just by ourselves. And so we really got to tap into that movement. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the people that are out there, they really need to tap into the elders who understand really how to move whole movements and make sure they get some insight to make sure they can sustain what's going on.
All right, thank you. All right, I think that does it today for this edition of Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali. And on behalf of our crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, and Dr. Akil Bashir, and our special guest, Mr. Youssef Andre Wali, go out and get his book, If I Knew Then. Make sure you do that. And until next week, and happy Mother's Day to the mothers out there.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day.
Yeah. And so until next week, same time, same channel, we'll see you again for our next edition of Justice Watch. Thank you.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.
Are your bones and joints as strong and as healthy as you would